Good morning, everyone. Today is Tuesday, Ches Tishrei. Yom Kippur is tomorrow night. Baruch Hashem. Today we're going to learn the fourth Perek of Kilayim. Today's shir is sponsored Dila Nishmas, Aaron Nachman, and Sucha Cohen, Yeshua Mordechai ben Shepsel, Bracha Sar Bashmol Leib, Yonah Moshe ben Yosef, Ben Hashemas Heaven Aliyah, and as a full shlema for Ada Sarah Bas Leah, B'so Shar, Choli Yisrael. Today's Perek Dalit of Kilayim, talks about Kilayim of a vineyard. Starts off, and the rules of a vineyard, of Kilayim of a vineyard are different, slightly. They have some variations from the Kilayim of grains, beans, and vegetables because it's a different pasuk. Klei Kerem is different mitzvah in the Torah, therefore there's some variations. Mishnah starts off Karachas HaKerem. When you the halacha is when we're clearing in a vineyard. A vineyard is a bald spot. It's a bald spot of a vineyard where there's like parts of the land that are that's not planted basically. Beishamai say Esrim Arba Amos. If there's an empty space at least 24 amos, then you can plant another species in the clearing. You do that by leaving a space of 4 amos empty next to each remaining side of the vineyard, and then you can plant the 16 amos in between. Okay. Okay. And Beis Hillel says Sheshes Amma, that a clearing of 16 amos is enough, and you can as long as you can plant 8 amos between the two work areas. The Mishnah continues. There's a similar rule. Michal HaKerem. We're talking about the gap between a vineyard and the wall that surrounds it. Michal HaKerem, the law for the perimeter of a vineyard is as follows. Beishamai says, Sheshes Amma, there must be an empty space of at least 16 amos between the vineyard and the wall that surrounds it before we can plant another species in that area. Beis Hillel says, an empty space of 12 amos is enough. The Mishnah now defines what is a clearing of a vineyard. Now that we know how much space you need, well, what is it? What is a clearing in a vineyard? What's a clearing in a vineyard? It refers to a vineyard that was destroyed in its middle. It was destroyed in its middle. The vines in the middle of the vineyard were destroyed or removed. This law, the law according to Beis Hillel is as follows: if there are less than 16 amos of empty space there, lo yavi zera then the grower cannot bring. He may not. He cannot plant any seeds over there. Hayusham sheshes ama, but if there are 16 amas there, no sting la avudasa uvizore esamusar. We can give the vineyard its work area, meaning 4 amos on each side of the clearing, next to the remaining vines, and he may plant the rest of the clearing with seeds. But the Mishnah, so Mishnah Beis, the Mishnah defines what the perimeter of a vineyard is, that we mentioned in the last Mishnah. What is the perimeter of a vineyard? Bain Kerem Lagoder. If it's the unplanted area between the vineyard and the wall that surrounds it. The law of the area, according to Hillel, is in the previous Mishnah is as follows. If there are less than 12 amas there between the vineyard and the wall, lo yavi zera l'shem. The grower may not bring and plant any seeds there. Hayisham shteim ama, but if there are 12 amas there between the vineyard and the wall, no stim lo avodasa. We give the vineyard its work area. That is, we leave 4 amas next to it empty, because you have 4 amas around the space in order to work over there. There's a rea es hamosa, and he may plant the rest of the space within the work area and the wall with the other seeds. Mishnah Gimel. Rabbi Yehuda Omer. So, so the previous Mishnah, Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel were discussing what the Tanna Kama had taught. This Mishnah is according to Rabbi Yehuda, which is a different opinion than the previous Tanna. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Rabbi Yehuda says, Ein ze ela geder hakerem. That this case that you describe as the perimeter of a vineyard is actually calling nothing other than the fence of the vineyard. And it does not need 12 amas between the vineyard and the fence in order to be able to plant it. What then is the perimeter of a vineyard that requires 12 amas according to Beis Hillel? It is the empty area between 2 vineyards. Since this area lies between 2 vineyards, we must leave 4 amas for each vineyard at its work area and an area of 4 amas in between the plant, so that it can be considered a field in its own right. So now we're going to talk about what type of fence, is good enough to separate a vineyard from the area beyond it regarding Kilayim. Basically, he get there. What type of fence is this? Shehu gova asar tvach. Any wall that is 10 tvachim, which is not that high off the ground. It's 10 tvachim is not that. It's about 2.5 feet. The charitz shehu amok asara the rachav arba, or a ditch that is 10 tvachim deep and 4 tvachim wide. Because you have a ditch that's deep, not just a wall that's above it. Mishnah Dalet. Mechitzas hakonim in ein bein kana lechaveru shlosh tvachim kadei sheikanas hagdi. So a partition of standing sticks lined up one next to the other, considered as a fence under the following condition. If there is no gap of 3 tvachim between one stick and the next, so you need 3 tvachim being enough room for a baby goat to enter. Harezek mechitza. It is treated as a valid partition. Okay. The god shenifratz, but if a fence broke open, and part of the fence fell down or broke apart, leaving an opening in the fence, the law is as follows: Ad esher amos harei hu kepesach. Up to 10 amos, the opening is regarded as a doorway, and one may plant even opposite the open space. Yaser miken keneged hapirtza asur. If the opening is more than that, it cannot be regarded as a doorway, and it is forbidden to plant seeds opposite the open space unless they are separated from the vineyard by 4 amos. The Mishnah explains how many gaps a wall may have, how many doorways. Nifritzu ben pirtzos harbe. If many openings broke open in the fence, im ha'omim ruba ala paritz. If the total amount of fence that is still standing is more than the total amount that is open, mutter, it is permitted to plant alongside the entire fence, even opposite the open sections, since each of these breaks may be considered a doorway. If the total amount that is open is more than the total amount of the fence that is still standing, it is forbidden to plant opposite the open sections. Okay, Mishnah Hey. Hanoteya shura shel chamish gefanim. If a person plants a single row consisting of five vines, Beishamai Omrim Karen. Beishamai says it's considered a vineyard. Yet there are five vines in one row. Beishilo Omrim Eino Karen says that's not considered a vineyard. Ad Shiyu Sham Shtei Shus until there are two rows with a total of at least five vines. The Beis Hillel, the Ficha, we see over here that Beis Shammai's rule is stricter than Beis Hillel's, and now we're going to see how Beis Shammai's rule is actually more lenient. The Ficha, Hazareya Arba Amma Shebekarem, the person plants seeds with the 4 amma work area of a full vineyard and thereby prohibits the vineyard. Beis Shammai says, Kidesh Shura Achas, he has forbidden only one row of the vineyard as Kilayim, since one row is enough to be classified as a vineyard. But Beis Hillel says, Kidesh de Shuros, he has forbidden 2 rows, since 2 rows are needed to qualify as a vineyard. Mishnah Vav, Anoteya Shtaim Keneged Shtaim, V'achas Yotza Zanav. If a person plants two vines facing 2 other vines, and one additional vine sticking out like a tail. Harezeh Kerem, it's a vineyard. Shtaim Keneged Shtaim V'achas Bein Taim. However, if he plants 2 vines facing 2 other vines, and plants one in between the 2 others, so that the middle vine in one row is facing the empty space between the 2 vines in the other row. Oh, or 2 vines facing 2 vines and one in the middle, facing the empty spaces. Eno Kerem is not a vineyard. Because 5 vines do not qualify as a vineyard unless there are 2 facing 2 and one sticking out like a tail. So essentially, I'm going to call pictures over here. This one is a good. You have 2, 2, and a tail. This one down here, and you have 2 and 2 on the bottom. That's not good. And over here, you have like this one over here is also not good. Those are the pictures. Hanoteya, Mishnah Zion, Hanoteya, Shura Achas V'Sof Shalo. Someone plants a single row of vines in his own property. The Shura Achas V'Sof Shachveru, and there's also an existing single row of vines in his friend's property. The Derech Hayachim Derech Harabim Be'emsa. There's a private road or a relatively narrow public road that passes between the 2 rows. Or there's a fence that is less than 10 tvachim high. These 2 combine with each other to qualify as a vineyard, since neither the roads nor the fence are large enough to separate between them. If, however, the fence is more than 10 tvachim high, the roads do not combine with each other to form a vineyard, because the fence 10 tvachim high separates the 2 rows from each other. Yehuda says, if you intertwine them above the fence, you raise the ends of the vines over the top of the fence that they grew to be twisted together. That even if the fence is higher than 10 tvachim, the vines combine to qualify as a vineyard. Okay, moving on. Mishnah Ches and Mishnah Tes coming right up. Let me see. Yeah, 2 more to go. Hanoteya Shtei Shuros. If a person plants 2 rows of vines, in Ein Beineim Shmona Amos, if there are less than 8 amos, between them, the rows combine with each of them to form a vineyard. Lo Yavi Zera L'Sham, and he may not bring seeds and plant them there between the rows. Hayu Shalosh, if there are 3 rows of vines, if there are less than 16 amos between one row and the other, then those rows combine to form a vineyard. Lo Yavi Zera L'Sham, and he may not bring seeds and plant them there. Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov Omer B'Shuv Chanina ben Chachinai. Elazar ben Yaakov says in the name of Chanina ben Chachinai, I feel Charva size. Even if the middle row of a 3-row vineyard was destroyed, the Ein Ben Shua the Charva touches Amma, and there are less than 16 amas between one remaining row and the other. The entire area is still considered a vineyard. Lo Yavizer Lasham, you may not bring seeds and plant them there between the rows. She'ilu Mitchila not done. Areza Mutta Vishmona Amos. This is true, even though had he planted just 2 rows to begin with, it would have been permitted to plant between them in the gap of nearly 8 amos. And finally, Mishnah Tes, Hanoteya es Carmo al Shesh Esrei Ama Shesh Esrei Ama. Person plants his vineyard with rows of vines at a distance of 16 amos from each other. Mutter lahavi zer l'sham. He is permitted to bring seeds and plant them there between the rows. Since the rows are separated by 16 amos, they do not combine to form a vineyard. It is therefore permitted to plant between the rows, as long as he does not plant within 6 tvachim of any of them. And Rabbi Yehuda said, Ma'aseh b'Salmon happened in a place called Salmon. Ve'echa shenata es karmo al shesesrei ama. That a certain person planted his vineyard with rows of vines at a distance of 16 amos from each other, and he wished to plant seeds between them. However, he was concerned that the vines would hang over the seeds and prohibit them. To avoid this problem, he would turn the ends of the vines of each pair of rows in the same direction, and he would then plant seeds in the plowed area between each pair of rows. Then in the following year, he would turn the ends of the vines to a different place in the other direction, and then plant the other species in the area he had left unplanted the previous year. And the matter came before the Chachamim of that time for ruling, and they allowed it. They're matter it. We see from the story that when there are spaces of 16 amos between rows of vines, the rows do not combine to form a vineyard, and other species may be planted in those spaces. Rabbi Shimon say, Av hanoteya is karmo, al shpona amos mutter. That even someone who plants his vineyard with rows of vines that are at a distance of 8 amos from each other is permitted to plant seeds between the rows. That is the end of chapter 4. We will continue with Perek tomorrow. Have a wonderful day.